So my paper will be about something I called or I termed a freedom to make sense. And to be honest, this term emerged during a conversation with Gendlin on the sofa. And I was very excited about this concept, about my concept, freedom to make sense. And he was excited too. But I realized that I couldn't really say much more about it because there was so much fuzzy meaning. And I must say it took years to spell it out. And I never spelled it out in such a way as I did now for this conference. So in this way, it's a kind of premiere for me to introduce you to this concept of a freedom to make sense. I think that in a time when we are flooded with information and opinions from our cell phones, from the computers and TVs, when we are flooded with news and fake news, and when what we do in our daily life has environmental impacts way beyond the little arena of our life and scope of thinking. And in a time where it is complicated enough to figure out one's next life step or step in a relationship. In this kind of complex time, it makes sense to think about a freedom to make sense. In a very Gendlian way, I allow myself, I want to say what I mean by freedom, because it is Gendlin that made us aware that words never just, can be covered by a definition or by the common stock of a meaning, but that they always mean much more. And they mean especially more if a term is important or relevant to us. So I want to say a little bit about what I want this word freedom to mean. The French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas and the French contemporary philosopher Corinne Pelluchat have analyzed that in the European philosophy, there is a concept of freedom that is built on power. The famous freedom of will, for example, it builds on this tacit assumption of autonomy so that one can will what one wants. And even Heidegger, the German philosopher Heidegger, who uprooted many tacit assumptions of Western philosophy, he still considers the fact that we are born without being asked as Geworfenheit, which means thrown into the world without our consent. So it even seems for a classical philosopher of the 20th century that to be born seems to be like a hurt, restricting human freedom, because no autonomous will could say yes. So my term of freedom, in freedom to make sense, does not imply non-restricted human willpower. What I want freedom to mean builds on the acknowledgement that we are interactional creatures through and through. This is a lesson we learn by modern day science, and this is a lesson we learn from Eugene Gendlin's A Process Model from the very first page. One could say interactionality is our birthmark. We come to be by the interactions of bodies and organisms within environments, within their interactions to environments, which again imply generations of interactions that transfer a life thread and an amazing know-how how to live, again within environments, which many of them are created by these very processes of interactional living, which also include the development of our own bodies, that, as Gendlin says, go vastly beyond our skin line. So what does freedom imply if one is always already in the midst, as the French philosopher Merleau-Ponty summarizes our human situatedness? What does freedom imply if we're deeply entangled with every fiber of our living to all other living? Let me come up with this definition. The freedom, I mean, allows for individual unfolding within a highly complex web of living that is transformed and carried forward by this very unfolding. This might seem complex, but we see it in nature. A flower gradually buds and unfolds while transforming the possibilities around her in a way that carries forward the soil, the insects that allowed her to unfold. Let me now say what I want to mean with the word sense in freedom to make sense. Sense is a term in which disembodied tensions of European philosophy or Western philosophy are tangible by the mere fact that sense making for a very long time implied to be a matter of the mind alone. To make sense of something implies we must think about it, which is done by the mind, or it's done in the head. Today it's done in the brain, and more by artificial intelligence. The rich sensory aspect of the word sense, even in the everyday use of making sense, has been for a very long time forgotten. So Eugene Gendlin has introduced this beautiful term, felt sense. And it has been absorbed in many contexts, and seldom with reference to the person who came up with it. The term is special as it draws together feeling, sense-making, senses, and in that way it bridges the mind-body gap in an elegant and in a very powerful way. So one could say the felt sense pulls the sense back into the body. The body is considered the place where we feel things, but we need not take this too literally. What makes this term provocative in a traditional context is the fact that the body and feeling were always considered as the other side, the opposite of mind and rationality. So the term felt sense as a term boldly overcomes this traditional cut. And this implies a shifting of other fundamental meanings structuring our understanding of ourselves and the world, such as mind and matter, feeling and rationality, inside and outside, subjective and objective. Felt sense implies a body that is capable of sensing into the hyper-complex interactional and situated living that it is, and to carry this living forward, amazingly enough, also in these cases when bodies can say what they mean. So a felt sense is an interesting concept also in another way, because as a concept it implies that its meaning develops and unfolds according to how we interact with it. A felt sense is never just an internal entity, it's never just something given. It needs to be attended to, it needs attention, it needs to be related to unfold. And in this respect, it is a bit like a quantum mechanical concept. So freedom to make sense implies a freedom of attending to a felt sense such that it unfolds and develops in meaningful ways that carries the interactional living forward from which it emerges and grows. I could maybe say that Mary Henrich's revolutionary pause and my freedom to make sense are interrelated terms. And I think my main consideration is that a freedom to make sense has educational implications and political implications. Educational systems are still driven by very disembodied concepts of mind and cognition, with implication that one must feed information and contents into minds, make them structure this content correctly, be clear and logical, be able to analyze, to synthesize, or to criticize given contents. These educational systems we are in hardly leave any deliberate room for an unfolding of meaning and thinking that is implied by the term freedom to make sense.